So just a couple months ago, I was sitting next to my father's deathbed and telling him my last words. Now, this was just as of April of this year, 2018. And I knew about 2.5 years ago, before that point, that he was going to pass. My dad was officially diagnosed with ALS 2.5 years ago, and I wasn't exactly sure how to take it. When I first was actually told of my father's death, it was quite the shock. I actually created a video not long, only a couple months after my father's death, and even at that point, it was very hard to talk about his death. It was extremely emotional for many months, right? Now, even today, right, I've noticed as of late, I've been doing a lot of reflecting on how everything has gone over the past, 2.5 years. And it's hard to deal with a parent's death. And rightfully so, right? If you're extremely close to that parent, sometimes that parent can be your best friend. And it's not easy, right? Especially if you have time. Now, I don't know if you've had this time where your parent might be fighting with some deadly disease, or if it was, sudden. But I watched my father deteriorate, from someone who used to constantly be weightlifting and running and be in good shape, right? He always took care of himself, and then to dwindle down to absolutely nothing, to where he could barely even walk. And it was extremely hard to watch that. I remember, visiting my father every couple months, and he would just get smaller and smaller to the point to where, his ribs were protruding. And, my father had a good spirit, right? He still tried to, flex on me and everything around the time when I was getting back in shape. And, he tried to be funny, right? And for me, it was just hard to watch him. I know what his intentions were, and I know he was just trying to get me to smile because he didn't want to deal with the fact of what was going on in his life. He didn't want to know anything about the disease itself. He had really never heard of ALS. And, when my father originally told me about him actually getting the results saying that he had ALS, he knew he only had a couple years left. I knew he only had a couple years left. When you're initially diagnosed with ALS, you have, 2 to 5 years. And my dad had gone a year without really knowing what he had. And so that was, again, a year knowing. He was losing his voice at that point, but, he thought it was some kind of sinus thing because he used to get a lot of sinus infections. And so, it all just kind of, life takes its course, and you live life, and especially if you got like a family or anything like that, and work and everything, you're always busy. So, you try to do your best to visit him. And I initially visited him, once a year, then it was twice a year, and then it was every couple months, eventually at that point. And when you hear it, you don't want to listen, right? You don't want to believe it's true. And that's when I think I had my biggest hit, when he told me. That was something I didn't want to believe. I didn't want to hear that my father was diagnosed with ALS, right? It wasn't the time for it, right? I was being selfish. I was going through a rough time in my own life, and then to hear that my father was going through this, that's the last thing I wanted to hear. But, my father was a strong individual, and I always, was in contact with him, always trying to help him out as much as I could. And, the biggest thing is when you are dealing with the passing of a parent, particularly over the past couple months for me, right? It's been hard because I knew it was coming. I knew this particular time was going to come, and I don't think it made it any easier knowing that, my father's time was coming. It was like everything was put in slow motion, right? Until he eventually did pass away. But it was still hard, right? It was still very mind-numbing, especially the day he did pass, right? I got a call, I remember exactly, it was early Monday morning. My older sister called me and she said that I had to come now. My dad had been in the hospital for a month battling pneumonia, and he was just starting to come out. My uncles were over there visiting him, and he seemed to be bouncing back. And then all of a sudden, once the weekend passed and all my uncles went away, it just hit. It just took him. And I got a call Monday morning, and I got a ticket that evening, flew out, and met my older sister there, and it was hard. And my older sister dealt with a lot of the stuff because she was closer to him where he was living at to where we were compared to him, which we were hundreds of miles away, so it wasn't very easy for us to actually get access to my father. But nonetheless, dealing with it, right, and understanding that once that moment happened, like it's been 8 months since my father has passed, and it's been like a flash, right? Like ever since that night when I flew up there, my dad was on a machine when I had gotten there, so he wasn't conscious at all. He was like this for, I can't really remember, I think it was like about 2 days to where he actually did pass. And it's just hard to recall, like it was such a flash, right? Like between that point and now, it's just all blended together. And this whole couple months have been hard, right? It started out extremely hard. We had to, my father passed in New York, and he wanted to be buried in Michigan, so we had to, ship his body to Michigan and then bury him a month later, which I think was hard, right? You try to get rid of those emotions and start dealing with it, and then you turn around and, have to bury him, which is hard, but it felt right? Like that's where he grew up, and it was good to be back there and to be around my father's family and stuff like that. But I think the biggest thing is now, right, it's been, like I said, 8 months, and time has really flown by. Like, I can't believe it's been that long already. It seems like years, and just the time itself, I think, is something extremely hard to comprehend when you're going through something like this, and to realize that the first couple months for me were very emotional to even think about it. And I couldn't think about my father without getting emotional. And so I would, keep myself busy and try to concentrate on other things. I had other things going on in my life that I could concentrate on, right? And I think that's the biggest thing. When you're trying to cope with your parents' death, yes, you should provide that time where you're gonna grieve, right? It's very important to grieve and allow yourself to go through the different stages, right? Because that's extremely important. You need to not run away from that. Understand that, yes, these things will happen, and you're gonna have to take it day by day. And that's what I did. And every day seemed long, right? And every day slowly got better. Now, things aren't just gonna, magically be 100% better, even like today, right? Like, I can talk about my father now without getting emotional, which is something I've noticed over the past couple of weeks. Is before then I couldn't do that, but now I can. And so that's just the biggest thing, is to, take it day by day, and it will get better. Understand that it will get better. Things will get better in the sense that, you're going to be able to get to a point to where you're going to accept the change, right? Accept that your parent is no longer with you. and that, that's fine because of the fact that they're in a better place, right? And I don't know what your religious beliefs are. I'm not sitting here trying to tell you, what is what, but I know my father's in a better place. He suffered a lot over the past 2 years, right? Just before his death. And for myself, that was, again, it was hard for watching. I can only imagine what my father was going through. And so, I try to, again, keep myself busy. I think that's the biggest thing when you're going through something like this, is to know that life will be forever changed. And you just learn to adapt to that, right? And it takes time to adapt to that. And with any change in life, it's painful, right? Especially when it's someone you lose. When it's someone you lose, you will feel a lot of pain, and it will take time to adapt. And in that sense, I know my father's looking over me. I know my father's, doing what he can from the other side, essentially. But just to know that the best thing you can do is to keep yourself busy, right, through those days, and take it a day at a time. Because if you think this is just gonna pass overnight, it won't. Some people can, get through particular situations like this a little bit faster. Other people, have a little bit longer time, and that's perfectly okay. The thing is you have to go on your timeline, right? You have to go with what makes sense to you, but you're gonna want to take it day by day. You're going to want to find something that can distract you from any of the, negative thoughts that might be going through your head, or anything that you might be struggling with during this time period. So you really just don't want things to spiral out of control. You want to be able to keep some control on what's going on. Yes, you want to be able to grieve and stuff like that. That's why I find it's extremely important to find something, some kind of positive way that you can, keep yourself occupied, right? And still try to keep yourself on track. Because, when something like this happens in your life, it can really seem like you get punched in the stomach, right? And just your air is taken away. You don't know what to do. You're only focused on the aspect of their passing, right? And so I just want to tell you that you're going to make it, right? You just have to take it day by day. You have to find something that actually brings you happiness, right? What do you enjoy, right? Find that one thing that you enjoy and just stay focused on that until you can get through this part of your life. And that's something I have found that has helped me, right, get through it. And I've always been a big person on, working out, right? That's always been my outlet. Whenever I go through a lot of struggles in life, I always jump to working out, and that's really helped me. Now, I'm not saying that's the same for you. It may be the same for you, it may not be, but it's also a big de-stressor and has, a lot of benefits that helped me get through this particular situation. And for you, maybe that's it. Maybe working out is something that would help you. Maybe, reading, maybe, going out and being with friends. Whatever the outlet is, it should always just be a positive one, right? One that's actually going to make you happy. Because you noticed that when you're not busy, when you're going through this situation, all you're gonna do is sit and think. And a lot of times, that's not the best thing to do, right? You want to try to take up as much time in your day keeping busy and doing things that will keep your mind occupied. Now, for me, I don't believe, sitting and watching, movies or something like that isn't going to help, because you find that your mind really drifts off, right? You got to be actively doing something. If you're actively doing something that makes you happy, I think that can really help you get through this particular situation, because you're going to eventually come to the point, you're going to come to the realization that no matter what you do, these thoughts are going to come up, right? And that's perfectly okay. You address those thoughts when they come up, right? That's the biggest thing, is you want to address those thoughts when they come up and allow them to happen, right? Allow yourself to get emotional, because that's just part of grieving. This is what you need to be able to get over this particular situation. And for myself, like I said, it's been months since I've been able to talk about my father without getting emotional. And even like now, right, I can start reflecting now about what happened and everything, and you know, just trying to allow myself to, you know, come to the realization that it's a new change, right? So just know that everybody takes, you know, a loss differently. Everybody deals with it differently, and then that's okay. You got to deal with it in your own way. You're going to have to allow yourself to give yourself time. Again, it took me 8 months to be actually think about my father without getting emotional. That's a long time. And again, the time flew by very fast. And that's something you really have to look at, right? And still focus on those things that matter, still be able to do what you have to do. But, you know, make sure in that spare time, because that's ultimately what it's about, right? Is that in that spare time that you have, make sure you're doing something that makes you happy, right? Make sure you're feeling that those time periods with something that, you know, can get that stress out, can get that anger out, can, you know, allow you to feel better and get through this process, right? That's the biggest thing, because a lot of times you're gonna find yourself sitting in bed and you can't escape those thoughts. Those thoughts are gonna come up. And as long as you're doing something in that spare time that's trying to, you know, kind of counter that stuff in a way to help provide your day with some, you know, a brighter side to your day, right? Because you don't want to be sitting and dwelling about what happened. You know, I think, you know, these things happen. We all know our parents are going to pass at some point. And, you know, again, that could be sudden, or it could be over a duration where, you know, that maybe they, you know, have a disease like my father did. And I know you have time. I don't know if that's better or not. I mean, I only know one side, and again, I've told my story about that, but you know, you just have to deal with it the way you can and fill that empty space with positivity, and don't allow yourself to look at other things in your life that, you know, are an escape that can really cause you to spiral out of control, because that can be, you know, such an easy outlet to fall into. And as many times over the past couple months, you know, I've thought about it, you know, just, you know, going for a couple drinks and, you know, just try to escape. And, you know, that's not really been me. Now, in my younger years, that would have been different, but, you know, at the age I'm at now, I don't feel like that would help. Like, I felt like what I did, you know, staying busy, staying focused on something that brought me happiness, you know, to feel those dark days, right? Because they can be very dark. Some days are really hard, and you need that spark, right? You need that spark in every day to, you know, lighten the mood essentially, right? To get you through, because it will take time to adapt to that change. And that's the biggest thing I hope you guys get out of this video, is that you just want to fill that spare time, right? Just fill out that spare time with as much joy and happiness and whatever you can that's positive, right? Because the whole day will not be that way, right? There'll be days where you'll think about your parent, you know, wherever that is, you know, it comes randomly, and some days are worse than others. And, you know, as long as you're trying to fill, you know, part of that void with some kind of happiness that helps lighten the mood a little bit and helps get you through, and then you realize further down the road that, you know, you're doing better. And again, it's still a day at a time. Like I said, it's been 8 months since he's passed, and I myself am doing a lot better. You know, I'm starting to kind of come out of that funk where I felt like I've had like this fog over me for the past couple of months, and everything's been going like warp speed, and everything's starting to slow down a little bit again, and my mind isn't so foggy anymore. And so that's just something I hope can help you in what you're going through, and realize that there is a brighter day, that change is hard, and you just have to learn how to adapt to what's going on. And I know right now it's easier said than done. Believe me, I was there just a couple months ago, and from that point till now, I've come a long way. So that's just something I hope that helps you when dealing with this particular situation, and know that there's other people out there that can help. If you feel like you can't do it yourself, look for help. Look for your friends, look for your family. There's places you can call. There's tons of places, right? You're not alone, right? And you can make it through. You'll be fine. Just try to put a little bit of happiness in every day. Whatever makes you happy, do a little bit of that every day, right? Just feel that time, feel that empty time. If you're working and you find you have a couple hours after work, don't go home and sit on the couch. Just go out and do something, right? Maybe you enjoy coffee, go get a coffee, or you like reading books or whatever. Just go read a book, right? Do something that's a little more active, right? Maybe not so much read a book, but do something that's a little more active that can keep your mind off the situation, because it's going to come. You're going to just keep that positivity in there and try to do this every day and deal with those thoughts, allow the grieving, and I know you can do it.